La stjernene få dysse deg i søvn. Hold av en plass til meg i din drøm. Og vær da ikke redd mens du sover, for natten skader ingen, og jeg lover. Jeg vil våke ved din side og vokte deg i natt. Og senere, når dine øyne åpnes, og dagen skjenker av sitt lys til deg, vær da ikke redd mens du våker, for dagen er din venn, og jeg lover, når den er over, vil jeg våke ved din side og vokte deg igjen. So now we will continue with the second part of our reading of the second chapter of The Red Lion by Maria Seppes. And the chapter is called Eduard, Anselmus, Rochard. And we left our protagonist in the incarnation he is telling us about here. He is Hans Burgner in the 1500s, and he has just met this person, Eduard Anselmus Rochard, and he is thinking that he has found the alchemist that he is looking for. Next morning, when he wasn't in his room, I used the skill acquired from Messer Vincenzo Giacomini to open Rochard's chest. There were books in it, astronomical instruments, writing materials, and a large supply of French gold coins. Now, I do not deny that I burglarized his room. Hans Burgner was not choosy about his methods in those days. He was still primitive, filled with dangerous passions and untouched by ethical considerations. Inside the chest there were 2 books by Albertus Magnus, the book written by Arnoldus Villanovarus, called Testamentum duobis libris universam artem chemicam complectens, 3 textbooks on astronomy, and under all these a locked notebook with a red cordovan binding. Naturally, the lock was no obstacle. I felt this book contained the key to Rochard's secret. The first page was entitled Secretorum Tractatus. I had not been mistaken, but the text was mostly in Latin, with inserts in French and short passages in German, and I could read only the German and a little bit of the Latin. My hands trembled as I thumbed through the notebook, my ears alert for the slightest noisy outside. Rochard apparently dated his notes like a diary. Suddenly one German text caught my eye. Spying on my secrets is useless. I could shout them from the rooftops and they would still be secrets. This scared me as though I had received a personal rebuke. I began to sweat as I read on, and my heart pounded wildly. I could proclaim this secret as the sun, moon, and stars proclaim the sky, as the earth proclaims itself under human feet, as water, fire, wind, plants, and animals proclaim themselves, and they still would not understand it. How can they understand the large universe when the small one, their own bodies and souls, is a mystery to them sealed with 7 seals? Then there was a French text and then a sentence that began in German and finished in Latin. Gold and elixir. If they could get hold of them, they would adorn corpses with the first and stuff the other into the mouths of the putrefying worms to fatten them. Raris haec ut hominibus est ars, ita raro in lucem prodit, laudetur Deus in aeternam, qui partem suam infinita, potentia nobis suis objectis simis, creaturis communicat. Further on, again in German, he who lives too long should change his name. The name Flammel, for example, is known to too many. I didn't have any more doubts. Excitedly, I thumbed to the end of the notes and found what I was looking for. October 12th, 1555. His name is Hans Burgner. He is wild, unpolished, dangerous, and touching. Perhaps he interests me because he reminds me of a face I have seen in the mirror somewhere during the time of chaos. This chest is heavy, and I am getting a little bit lazy. I must be on guard to keep the weaknesses of my body from defeating me. Pity, for example. He knelt down and spoke with the elixir. He is intelligent as a young animal is, and terrifying reflexes slumber within him, reflexes of which he himself is unaware. His eyes follow me everywhere. Unfortunately, dogs have always moved me. End of Rochard's quote. Now I possessed the spark that could melt the icy wall of his reserve. He felt sorry for me, and he was interested in me. It would have been unwise to stay in his room any longer. I relocked the notebook, put everything in the chest back into place, padlocked it, and shoved it back under the bed. Even now, I find it difficult to trace the interweaving currents that boiled inside Hans Burgner that day when he left Rochard's room. There were so many powerful contradictions. Dark and light, fire and water mingled. Thus the chaos whirls in the incandescent, seething spiral nebulae of nascent solar systems. The youth was exalted by finding the magister, admired him to the point of worship, and wanted to serve him humbly and unconditionally. Yet at the same time he was treacherously scheming to force this master to take him into his service. Nor did his burglary and lying trouble him. Naturally, he had to know for sure, and naturally Rochard must never learn about it. Otherwise, he would never even speak to the boy again. Fortunately, Rochard did not know about it, and the deed that is not known might never have been done. That evening, I knocked at Rochard's door, excited but determined. His expression was not unfriendly. His notebook lay closed in front of him, but he must have closed it when I knocked, for the tip of his long reed pen was still wet. I came and stood quietly in front of him. The humble, respectful entreaty in my eyes was an honest emotion, but it was only a fragment of those that seethed inside me. "Well, what do you want, Hans?" Rochard asked. It was an encouraging sign that he called me by my first name. "I would like to ask the magister to permit me to become his pupil. I make good money here at the inn, and I would pay. I could take lessons in the evening if..." "But what do you want me to teach you?" "Well, I know a little Latin, but I would like to learn some more, and I have always been interested in the physician's art. I don't want to hand luggage and haul luggage all my life. Perhaps I could become a gentleman or even a scientist. I learn quickly, so I wouldn't give you much trouble." Rochard looked at me thoughtfully, his lips tightly closed. Then his gaze glided past me, and I felt him receding, disappearing once more into the unfathomable. "Please don't reject me, sir, I beg you." My voice trembled with emotion. "I want to learn so much. I want knowledge, the way most men want a woman. I'm poor, and there's no one in the world who will help me. Sebastian, my friend, the only person who ever cared about me, died. Don't you turn away from me too. I cannot bear to keep living as I am. Please help me." Suddenly his eyes turned back to me. He stared at me quietly for a long time, and I felt his gaze burning through to the innermost depths of my soul, reading my deepest secrets. Presently, he spoke. "I know that you are telling me some of the truth and making some of this up. I know the real reason you cling to me. You are still an unripe fruit in spite of your sharp mind. Knowledge in your hands could become either a key or a weapon. I ought to send you away, but I cannot. I feel some kind of obligation to you, something I don't understand. It worries me, yet perhaps it is better for me to keep you with me. Otherwise, you would be sneaking around behind my back. I'll take you into my service and teach you, but only the science of this world. You needn't expect me to do anything more. If you are industrious, I will see that you get to take the necessary examinations and get a diploma. Then you can be a respected citizen, raise a family, and acquire as much money and fame as your ambition desires. But I repeat, I will only teach you knowledge that pertains to this world and the ordinary human lifespan. Do you understand, Hans?" "Yes, sir." "Do you still want to join me?" "Wait, I will not pay you. In a few weeks we will be leaving for Padua, and you will have to carry my chest, make my purchases, and make all the arrangements for our travel and lodging. I will pay your room and board, and I will furnish you shoes or clothing if yours should wear out while you are working for me." "Thank you, sir. That is more than I had ever hoped for. You have made me so happy. You will see. I will show my gratitude. I will be worthy of your trust. So help me God." At that time, I meant every word I said. And that was how I became the servant and student of Eduard Anselmus Rochard, the alchemist. At the time, I thought I owed my success to my own cunning. And although Rochard was very shrewd and saw through me, he could not yet see his own fate in me. He only sensed it, but this had been the reason he could not turn me down. My craving for knowledge was genuine, of course, and so was my elixir monomania. He was fully aware of my immaturity, but this was cancelled out by his deep, humane kindness and his empathy for me. Thus, the great planner's design was woven into the vast fabric of destiny according to its predetermined plan. The two of us had searched and waited for each other and had finally met in 16th century Nuremberg. I to start a new cycle on the strange ark, and he to end his earthly cycle. I soon learned that though Rochard had many passing acquaintances with whom he would converse in the Sebaldus bar, he had only one friend. This was Amadeus Bar, the librarian of the Count of Zellern. Almost every day he would visit Bar in the adobe house inside the castle park, where the weak-chested little man had been sent to live when guests overflowed Zellern Castle. This isolation was no particular burden to Bar. He enjoyed living among the heaps of books, manuscripts, and dust that surrounded him. It was almost as though he slept on, ate, and breathed books. He used to lend great heavy volumes to Rochard, and I would have to carry them to our quarters. For this reason, I was sometimes allowed to go with him on his visits to Bar. On one such occasion, I managed to listen to an exciting debate on alchemy, even though Rochard had sent me home. I had carried back the heavy book Bar had lent, and when Rochard had selected another one, he sent me home to study, but I had other ideas. I went around the house and sneaked through the thick trees to the open back window. There I lay flat on my stomach in the dense weeds under a prickly gooseberry bush. Amadeus Bar, I had learned, was a genius at debating and loved the art, while Rochard merely discoursed. Yet his gentle, smiling tranquillity would slowly wear down the tiny Lucifer with his flaming sword. I had instinctively sensed that Rochard had a more powerful personality, and Bar, who was a perceptive scholar, recognized this. Bar had a clear, analytical mind, and until he met Rochard, he had been an outspoken opponent of alchemy. He had rejected it only after intense study, and his arguments against it were excellent and amusing. Now he began the battle by making some categorical statements. All this fable of universal medicine simply deceives the masses, he declared, and the transmutations, so-called, that are proclaimed from the housetops have always turned out to be merely worthless metal coloring that did not change the specific gravity of the substance. Rochard quietly asked if anything like this had been proved in the case of Nicholas Flamel. The name Flamel made my heart jump and roused my senses to fever pitch. No! There was mocking laughter in Bar's voice. Of course it wasn't proved. Human stupidity clouded the evidence. Flamel was a more skillful scoundrel than most, that's all. Perhaps, Rochard replied. You will probably think I am stupid also, but I make bold to confess that when I talked to him not long ago, he gave the impression of being an honest and modest man. You talked to whom? Bar asked incredulously. To Nicholas Flamel. When? 2 years ago, when I was in Egypt. I had gone with a commercial caravan to get a certain plant that can be processed to relieve festering eye diseases. One of my rich patients had been happy enough to pay my fare. One day we saw a small group of 5 people crossing the desert ahead of us, and we caught up with them in the noon heat when we joined them in the cool shade of an ancient tomb. The group turned out to be a French couple with 3 servants. Since they were my fellow countrymen, I greeted them. It was a very interesting meeting. Excuse me, interrupted Bar. I don't quite follow. Your fellow countryman told you he was Nicholas Flamel? Nothing of the sort. I found out for myself that the couple was Nicholas Flamel and his wife. But how did you find out? By very convincing signs. You are joking, making fun of me, Bar exclaimed angrily. If I remember rightly, Nicholas Flamel was born in 1330. This is 1555. Do you mean to tell me you've met a 225-year-old man? You don't really expect me to believe that, do you? I'm not a credulous fool. I myself have seen a 100-year-old graybeard. He sucked his thumb and somebody had to wipe his nose. No man could live 225 years. unless he filled himself to the brim with a mythical elixir. Yes, only then. But there is no such thing. Are you sure? I am sure that Flamel was devoured by worms just as you and I will be. Who watched him die? Rochard asked gently. He was rich, respected, and famous, surrounded by numerous followers and friends. But which one of them attended his funeral? Who knows where his tomb is? No one, but that's not proof. No, but it is interesting. A number of travelers claim to have seen him in various parts of the world, and the old records also record such instances. That's not even worth debating, protested Barr. Flamel simply disappeared from Paris and changed his name. He wanted to appear immortal, so he died somewhere else under an assumed name, and thus became a legend. That's not unusual in our pitiful age. Just look around you. Alchemy is a greater reality than the plague. Even you are contaminated with it. Just because nobody knows the true story of Nicolas Flamel's death, somebody sees him in every French confidence man who comes along. I had seldom heard Rochard laugh, but he laughed wholeheartedly now. Why are you laughing? Barr asked suspiciously. Don't be angry. Rochard tried to stop laughing as he spoke. It's the situation that's funny, not you. It reminds me of an amusing story. Let me tell it to you. By all means. Barr's voice still sounded suspicious. All right. Once upon a time, there was a clever and learned Chinese named Hui Shen, who lived in the province of Shanxi on the Huanghe or Yellow River. He was so clever that people came from all over the country to gather around his bulrush mat and listen to his endless debates with a gentle old village priest. For years they had been debating the existence of spirits. The priest insisted that spirits existed, but his only proof was that he regularly saw and talked to them. But Hui Shen had exactly 777 arguments to prove that spirits did not exist. Anyone who claimed to see them was either sick or drunk. Anyone who talked with them was only mumbling a senseless dialogue to himself. The air and the sky were really empty, and only the graves were full of rotting bodies. Man was the spirit, and when he died, everything ended. Hui Shen would crush the old priest's arguments like eggshells, and if others spoke up in support of the priest, he crushed their arguments too. He would not allow the slightest possibility for even the tiniest spirit to squeeze into the universe. His arguments were invincible. Finally, the old priest got tired of these fruitless debates. He told Hui Shen that his health was no longer good enough for him to continue with them, and he would send someone better prepared to argue. This left Hui Shen alone with a whole storehouse of unused arguments. No one would debate him. If he so much as opened his mouth, people backed away out of fear. One evening, Hui Shen was preparing for bed. He was restless and dissatisfied because he had had no one to argue with for days. Then he noticed a skinny, dark man sitting on the other rush mat. Hui Shen was amazed, for he had not seen or heard him come in. He was about to reprove him for bad manners when the stranger spoke. "I am the one for whom you have been waiting. A friend of mine sent me to convince you of the truth. He says you don't believe in spirits." But of course not, Hui Shen burst out in his relief. He forgot all about his plans for going to bed. Already he loved this white-robed stranger, and he would not have let him go for anything in the world. He began to present his arguments in a sarcastic, mocking voice. He stated and refuted, argued and proved without ever giving his opponent a chance to open his mouth. Every time the stranger took a breath to say something, Hui Shen would raise a hand to forestall him. "Wait, I know what you're going to say, You needn't tire yourself." Then he would raise his voice and enumerate the others every possible argument, then dissect and kill it. The stranger grew increasingly gloomy and restless and kept trying to speak, but Wei Shen would stop him before he could utter a single word. This went on until the silver rays of dawn lightened the window and a rooster started crowing in the yard. Then the stranger lost patience, jumped up, and interrupted Wei Shen's steady flow of words. "Silence, you wretched fool!" His angry voice shook Wei Shen's tiny house. "I cannot refute your damned reasoning. What you say sounds like the truth, except that it is not. In spite of all you say, there are spirits, damn it, because I myself am one." With that, he disgustedly evaporated before the eyes of the deflated Wei Shen. Bard could not help laughing at this story, but when he realized what it meant, he stared soberly at Rochard. At this point, I peeked through the window to look at the two still figures in the circle of the candlelight. "Why do you use every possible means to confuse me, Anselmus?" Bard demanded. "There's something irritating and unfathomable about you. Damn your innuendos! You'll get me sent to the exorcists yet." "I don't see why," Rochard replied innocently. "I only told you a Chinese tale, and you are not easily taken in, Amadeus." "No, I'm not," Bard growled. "But no matter how I fight them, your words affect me. For the first time in my life, I can refute something and still not be able to dismiss it altogether. It worries me. You were joking just now when you said Nicholas Flamel was still alive 2 years ago, weren't you?" "No, I wasn't joking. He is still alive now." "The elixir keeps him alive?" "Yes." "I simply can't understand it. I know your mental ability, erudition, and your intellectual honesty. How can you believe this madness?" "You are wrong, Amadeus. I don't believe. I'm not so gullible either. I know." Bard turned red. He jumped up from his chair and then sat down again, fuming. "Well, that's that, I suppose. What am I going to do about you? And what am I going to do about myself when you leave me alone with all these questions? I can't even sleep anymore." "Why not?" "Why not? Because something in me is drawn to you by some illogical, invincible magic. I don't know how to explain it. I've brooded about it a good deal. Your most nonsensical statements radiate an irresistible force. Yet, I'm no worshipper of authority. In fact, I'm a passionate iconoclast. All these abstract and transcendental fogs just annoy me. I put up with them in you, and I can't understand why. I had given up faith in everything and resigned myself. Complete nihilism brings peace, you know. Now you come in and disturb my personal religion and urge me to become a heretic. You have made me doubt my own doubt, and the most astonishing thing is that you haven't done it by arguments. It's your very personality. It's not what you say, it's what you are. You radiate certainty without direct communication. It's like, well, it wouldn't occur to me to doubt the existence of an oak tree when I'm standing in front of one. I must confess that I'm not a bit sorry to disturb your religion, Amadeus. In fact, I am going to try to bring about your total damnation." "But why did you choose me?" Barr asked. "The world is full of pious jackasses who would offer you their faith on a platter. I'm a hard nut to crack, rebellious, cantankerous, backsliding old sinner." "Well, I would tell you the parable of the prodigal son, but you'd throw something at me." I won't even mention the Saul who became Paul. We'll stick to the facts. The blind faith of jackasses is like a puddle in the summer heat. It will take the form of any basin offered it. Your icon-smashing Scorpio individuality is much more attractive. You might say I have a weakness for that sort of personality. You and I are walking the same path, you know, the path of intelligence. I've struggled through the same labyrinth myself. Why shouldn't I shorten the path for a friend, especially an old friend to whom I owe so much? Answer one question for me, Anselmus. More than one if need be. Will you sit down with me and explain this conviction of yours clearly, without any hazy hints or occult references? Will you tell me what experiences brought you to it and what your proofs are? Yes. Then let's make an engagement. When will you do it? Soon. Before I go to Padua. Now was time for me to leave. I ran back to the inn as fast as I could, panting and sweating, spread my books and papers in front of me in my cubbyhole and stared at the blank sheets. One thought overwhelmed me, filling my whole being. He who lives too long should change his name. The name Flamel, for example, is known to too many. Rochard's conversation with Amadeus Bar had revealed the meaning of these words. Who saw him die? You were joking just now when you said Nicholas Flamel was still alive 2 years ago, weren't you? No, I wasn't joking. He's still alive now. Still alive. Flamel was a Frenchman, and so was Rochard. He who lives too long should change his name. Nicholas Flamel, Eduard Anselmus Rochard. But what about his wife? They had discovered the philosopher's stone together, and she also drank the miraculous elixir. Well, why shouldn't they have separated for a little while? They had a staggering vista of centuries before and behind them. They didn't need to dog each other's tracks. There was no hurry. They had time for everything. Rochard had not hidden anything from Bar. In fact, he had practically stunned the little bookworm with his openness. Why did he reveal so much to him? Why did he lavish the treasures of his wisdom on a skeptic and refuse them to me, who longed for occult knowledge with my whole soul? I studied like a fanatic and got my homework done ahead of schedule and all. All I got was very good, Hans, well done, Hans, just like he would talk to a well-trained dog. Any time I cautiously turned the conversation to alchemy, he would become uncommunicative immediately and, if I persevered, he would stop me. This isn't the road for you, Hans, he would say. Stop thinking about it. You would only learn enough to get you in trouble. Your passion for the elixir is a dangerous one. It springs from a greedy, dark desire. I will never lead you to your destruction. That evening, I was so obsessed with my idea that Rochard was really Flamel that I had to say something or burst. So, when Rochard came to hear my lessons, I didn't hesitate to tell him I hadn't done them. I had been completely engrossed, I told him, in some words I had accidentally overheard while I was leaving Bar's. It had been something about the elixir and Nicholas Flamel. Oh, so you were eavesdropping. Well, I'm not surprised. I should have known. To my surprise, his face did not show its usual rigid rejection. He seemed to be musing, and there was pity in his eyes. He sat down at the table with me. I feel sorry for you, he said quietly. I am sorry because I have grown to like you, Hans. You are a talented and intelligent child, but you're still a child. You still have a childlike mixture of tenderness, unpredictable passions, and dangerous curiosity. Don't think I'm belittling you. You do very well indeed on your own level, but nature can't be hurried. Life cannot be conceived in a child's womb. I am keeping these things from you simply to protect you. Please try to believe me and understand that there is no elixir for a person in your stage of development. Adult elixir would poison both soul and body. I had heard only 2 points in this lecture. 1. He had mentioned the elixir as a reality to me for the first time. 2. He considered the doubter Bar an equal and me just a child. I erupted in bitterness. Why, I asked, did he trust the sour librarian of the Zellern court more than he trusted me when I was a diligent disciple on the mystic path? He is mature, Hans. Rochard spoke to me tenderly. He is mature mentally as well as physically. Many evil passions have burned out in him. Now he only needs his eyes opened. But what could happen to me if I try the elixir? I asked heatedly. I'm not afraid of anything. You are wrong. There are still things you need to be afraid of. When a certain level of development has been reached, fear can indeed be cast aside so the soul can soar. But until then, it's a necessary ballast. He who is weightless inside is swept away by every gust of wind. You ask what could happen to you if you attempted to seize the occult forces of the elixir? Rochard continued quietly. I will tell you, you could get into a state worse than death. You see, the books don't mention the secret effects of the elixir. Let me warn you about it now, Hans. It might even kill a person whose soul is full of the lower impulses. Even if his body should overcome the terrible shock, he would still become a mental leper, trapped for eternity in a torment of painful, festering sores. Here is what I mean. There is a beneficial veil over the eyes of mortal man that keeps him from being aware of the demonic beings who fill the ether. The elixir breaks through this protective barrier even in the case of adepts. But adepts are prepared for it. They had already rid their souls of demonic characteristics, and they are able to overcome these astral beings. But when all the bonfires of passion still rage in a man, the demons rush in and capture him. They use his own fear and weaknesses to weave a noose around his neck. Rochard paused, then continued gravely. When the elixir is acquired by force, it infects the disobedient disciple with a horrible dis-ease that drives him from disaster to disaster. He can never again become a part of the normal, slow process of evolution. His life is one long agony of insatiable desires, unquenchable thirsts, and incredible loneliness. Nor can he hope to escape through the universal exit of suicide. That route is closed to him. He can die only at the violent hands of another. Otherwise, no hatchet, dagger, sword, rope, fire, or any other agent can smother his burning consciousness or his memory. That is all I can tell you now, Hans. Don't ask any more, otherwise you will have to leave my service. Do you understand? I understood that he had refuted me. I would not believe in his dark threats, nor would I accept his refusal. After all, he hadn't wanted to take me as his servant either, yet I was his servant. More than that, I had become his pupil. Now I only had to wait and observe with unbreakable tenacity. Eduard, Anselmus, Rochard had in his possession the only thing that meant anything in life, the divine substance. I had to stay with him. I would have to keep on with limitless patience and equally limitless pretense, taking every affront and sacrifice everything to reach my goal. He was the wizard of 1,000 kings, and I chanced to meet him one night, wandering. He told me tales, and he drank my wine. Me and my magic man kind of feeling fine. He had a cloak of gold and eyes of fire, and when he spoke I felt this deep desire to free the world from its fear and pain, and help the people to feel free again. Why don't we listen to the voices in our hearts? 'Cause then I know we'll find we're not that far apart. Everybody's got to be happy, everyone should sing, 'cause we know the joy of life, the peace that love can bring. Thus spoke the wizard in his mountain home. The vision of his wisdom means we'll never be alone. And I will dream of my magic night and the million silver stars that guide me with their light.